Welcome to the end of July issue. Is it an issue? I guess it's a video issue of CityBiz. I'm your host, Melinda Arndt. We have Councilman Michael Halley. We are sitting in the beautiful City Council chambers here, nearing the end of the month. Can you believe July has already sped by? We're here on one of the hottest days of the year. So going into August, we'll have certainly been making use of our air conditioning. We have some outdoor topics to talk about today as we wrap up July and head into August. And I have my cheat sheet right here. One of the first things we want to talk about, though, is the idea of a new volunteer center. Michael, what's the news on that?
Well, it's happened. The City Council voted to approve a volunteer center, basically a volunteer board or committee that's part of the city.
So it's a board, it's not a physical center building.
Well, they want to use the that area inside the library where there's kind of a desk kind of
Right. It used to be the information person's desk.
So years ago, there was a volunteer center that was not a city organization. It was its own private nonprofit. I was their board president for 3 years. And
I was involved on that board with you. I mean, and just hearing this is like music to our ears, although it's like, wow, why couldn't we have had this then?
But it really would have made sense, I think, to bring it over as a city group because a couple of the issues that we had were we were trying to pay a director, a full-time director, and we were able to find federal and state grants, but what we found was that the director spent most of their time doing the administration for those grants.
Yeah.
And so all that paperwork was taken away actually organizing events. And then what really shut us down was it was difficult to have liability insurance for events that the Volunteer Center as an independent organization would put together. So we ended up only being able to send people to organizations that had their own insurance. So it really limited what we could do. We could only send them to places that in a sense already had their own volunteer recruitment, like the Convention Center, Noah's Ark Animal Shelter, Lord's Cupboard, the food pantry. So that organization dissolved many years ago.
2015.
Yeah, and Mayor Boyer wanted to bring it back, and through some discussion, it made sense to bring it back as a volunteer-only volunteer center. So there's not going to be a paid director. It's just a 5-member board who will help direct volunteers to city projects and projects for local nonprofit groups.
Wonderful.
And we can use the same umbrella insurance that, say, the Beautification Commission, which is a city organization, would use for their events. So it essentially solves the problem of the insurance and it solves the problem of fundraising.
Yes, which was a big one, because also with the previous volunteer center incarnation, so shall we say, it started out with federal money behind it that decreased every year because the local community was supposed to make up the difference.
Yeah.
And we were the smallest town of all volunteer centers to support a volunteer center. So
it was great in a way that we had it, but it was too much for a town of 10,000.
Right. So we've had that experience, and there is a wonderful spirit of volunteering in Fairfield. So I'm heartened. Yep. I'm happy to hear about it.
Yeah.
Yay.
So we established it at our last council meeting and approved 5 members of a board and approved their bylaws. So
great.
It'll just be like another group, just like the Natty Committee or the Arbor Committee or the Beautification Commission.
Wonderful. So if we want to tune into the Volunteer Center or get involved in some way?
Well, for now, I can't remember. I don't know if they've chosen a chair yet.
Oh, okay,
so
but
I would
it's
just
pretty
say,
new.
Contact Mayor Boyer. mayor@fairfieldiowa.gov is the email.
Excellent.
And then you can call City Hall to get more information. 641-472-6193 is City Hall's phone number.
Great. Yeah. Because volunteering has never gone away, but it's nice to have a coordinating point. Mm-hmm. Well, another, I don't know if there's a project going on in Lamson Woods, but you said you had an update about Lamson Woods.
So after a year and a half of planning, we presented our proposed Lamson Woods management plan to the State Preserves Board. So Lamson Wood is a state preserve. That's different than just being a city park. It means the Department of Natural Resources Preserves Board has oversight. And so they needed to approve this plan to replace the temporary plan that's been there ever since it was established in, I think, 1977.
Oh, yes,
And
I
the
remember
plans
reading.
back then were hands-off, so we couldn't really go in and do anything. In that time, since then, more invasive species have come in, and there's some serious overcrowding of the hardwoods. And what that means is when you have too many big trees and sunlight isn't reaching the canopy, oak trees specifically don't grow in those conditions. There are understory trees that grow in those conditions, but if we just let it go, over the decades, it'll change the nature of the woodlands from an oak hickory predominantly woodland, native woodland, to something else. Say, Ohio buckeyes thrive in understory, so you'd have a different type of forest. So the management plan essentially allows us to do three things. One is manage the understory by removing invasive species. So there's basically two ways you do that. One is manually or mechanically, where you just have volunteers come in and cut and dig out the invasives. And then another way is a controlled burn. So burning it down, just the understory in a very controlled manner. The second thing would be removing certain large hardwoods. So again, thinking about the next generation. So opening up the canopy in certain places. Mm-hmm. And then the third thing is we would then, in some cases, plant native understory trees or bushes. Mm-hmm. And that's more or less to help the local wildlife. So in talking to our president of our Arbor Committee, Steve Taylor, I've learned that I think mostly about trees. Trees are one of my passions. And he also thinks about wildlife and how it all fits together. So a woodland isn't just its trees, it's all the other plants in there that feed species. And there are some native bird species that are having some real trouble in recent years. A harsh winter was enough to make a certain, I can't remember which one, a certain bird species is just not seen at all this spring here in our area. And they're thinking in time, those species from other areas, say northern Missouri, will move in. And just like the bald eagle came back, it does happen, but we can help that along by planting certain native bushes and trees that they feed off of. So really they feed off the insects that feed off the trees sometimes. So it's all the web of life. But it's a big deal that we got this approved by the Preserve Board, because now we are allowed to start the management process. So later today, the Arbor Committee is meeting, and we're going to start talking about first steps. So I think it's going to be, you're going to see understory management first, and then after the DNR does a fall and a spring assessment of what's going on in the area around the trees that we say we want to remove, maybe winter 2023, so January, February 2023, you would see some of those hardwoods coming down to open up the canopy. So one step at a time, but the first step was getting permission. So now that we have a management plan in place, we're good to go.
That was a big project. I remember we talked about this a number of episodes ago, about getting this plan going, putting it out for proposal. So now it's approved. Those of us who are out on the trails, whenever we can get out, as often as, we'll look forward to that transformation, which will certainly be a more gradual, like generational thing, but at least since 1967 to now. It's
77, but yep.
Well, anyway.
It's a long time.
Been quite a while.
Yes.
So Lamson Woods on the way to its original, to some recovery.
Yes, restoration of the native hardwoods.
Yeah, and there are many, many things blooming right now. Among them, well, this is going to lead into our special guest. We do have a special guest coming on the show today. I was going to say among the things that are blooming are orange cones on the roads, but
yes, you'll see a lot of those.
We will get to that. So we'd like to welcome to this edition of CityBiz, late July edition, Melanie Carlson, our city engineer. Many projects are afoot, and who better than to tell us about them than Melanie? We were just saying we get called each other's names, Melanie, Melinda. You probably get called Melissa, Melody. Yeah. And that's okay. We respond. 3 syllables, starts with an M. So take it away. You were talking about the bouquet of orange cones.
Yes, there is indeed a lot going on right now. I was at many of the job sites this morning and I'm still glowing from being out there. But probably the street that is causing the most disruption right now is 4th Street. 4th Street is closed between Depot and Grimes. Depot's open, but Grimes is closed, and those are both some very heavily traveled streets. It's closed right now for replacement of the water and sewer so that we can get those replaced before we do a street overlay. And the overlay is actually going to happen between Broadway and Depot. And as we know, 4th Street is very heavily traveled and it's a long time coming. People who drive that route are going to be glad to have this done, but we will have some disruption over the next month on 4th Street. Probably the project that then is the next most disruptive to people is 32nd, Suburban Heights Road. That project, right now they're currently patching the street out in that area, and that road is narrowed down to 1 lane right now. And one of the questions I have gotten on 32nd Street is, why are we patching it rather than just replacing the whole thing? If you've been out there, the patches are every few feet. Well, the simple answer is access. If we were to tear it up and replace the whole thing, we would have to create temporary access to the residents and the businesses that are out there. So by patching it 1 lane at a time, that allows us to keep access to people and try to be as least disruptive as we can, but yet improve the street. The next one that does not affect everyone's everyday travel, but is very anticipated by our manufacturing community, is 23rd Street, which is the Industrial Park Road.
Yes.
And that road is going to be starting on August 9th. There will be lots of detour signs and lots of cones popping up on Burlington and on 23rd and on Jefferson.
Because that post office annex is out there.
The post office annex is out there.
Amongst other things.
Yep. So there'll be a big change in traffic flow out in that area. We really encourage everyone to slow down in our construction areas and in our detour areas to keep people safe. Also, with the 23rd Street project, that contractor is going to be replacing 9th Street between Burlington and Washington, which is another major traveled area for people going to the rec center.
Yes.
So the rec center east parking, a couple of those driveways are going to be closed here soon as well. The east parking lot is still going to be open, but you're going to have to access it from Jefferson.
From the south end.
Yes, yep. So we're just going to try and get all of the disruption over the month of August, and hopefully the weather doesn't delay us too much, and we can get people back to their normal traffic flow in mid-September.
And hey, if it's a little inconvenience, but when else can these projects be done? It has to be done when there's the least possibility of rain. So all we can do is bear with and be happy for the outcome, right?
Exactly. And although we've got a lot going on right now, people are asking me, and they're always wondering, when's the street in front of my house going to get repaired? And so the city does have a long-term plan for many of the streets in the community and an assessment of all of the streets. So anyone who has questions about their street, they're welcome to contact me at City Hall. Don't contact me in the next month because I'll be busy with the construction projects, but we'd be happy to answer any of those questions for folks.
And thank you for making that accessible. So they just contact you through City Hall.
Yep. And I can email a copy, or I can sit down with someone and answer specific questions.
And then you can see when on the calendar your street or your section of street may be coming up on the list. So always good to know. I mean, we want our streets to be in good shape. Some streets, especially if you ride your bike around town.
Yes, and there's always that heartache or the troublesome time in order to get the street under construction, and we understand that is an inconvenience for people, but ultimately we want to get the street repaired.
Yeah, I see that West Carpenter, West Merrill, those are both coming along beautifully.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
Thank you so much for bringing us this update. And Melanie was the originator of this idea of the what's blooming in August are orange cones all over our streets. And I think that about nails it.
Yep.
The daylilies are just about done, so the orange cones, they'll be in bloom for about the next 6 weeks.
Thanks.
Yeah? Thanks so much for joining us here on CityBiz.
You're welcome.
This is enough of a detour into your day from us. Michael, Halley, Melinda, Arndt here at CityBiz. We look forward to seeing you at the very end of August.
See you then.
Stay safe.